Many regard Charles Chesnutt as the first African American writer of fiction to use the white-controlled publishing industry in the service of his social message about racial equality and the terrible impact slavery had on America. His writing often focused on middle-class Americans like himself, but also includes working-class characters from the small-town South whom he had known from his youth in eastern North Carolina. Charles Chesnutt was born to middle-class parents in Cleveland, Ohio, 2 years before the start of the Civil War. After the Civil War, the family returned to their family's home city of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Well-read, Chesnutt became an assistant teacher at the age of 14 and educated himself further by reading Latin and English and European classic literature. Eventually, he became the principal of a school in Fayetteville. However, Chesnutt bristled at life in the racist Reconstruction South, and he and his wife and children eventually moved to Cleveland, a city he was familiar with. At this point, Chesnutt's writing career took off when in 1885 he published his first story in a national magazine. The story was called Uncle Peter's House. He wrote mostly humorous, sentimental tales and collected black folk tales. Eventually, in 1899, a collection of these folk tales was published under the title The Conjure Woman. After passing the bar exam in 1887, Chesnutt worked as a court reporter and grew his law practice. His writings became more political, and he wrote essays in which he advocated for an end to all forms of segregation. Scholars have seen a shift in his fiction at this point. In 1889, he published the short story, The Sheriff's Children, a realistic story that one critic has described as protest fiction. Set in Troy, North Carolina in the 1870s, it reveals the horror of life in the Reconstruction South, as well as the insidious nature of slavery and its terrible impact on black women and children, and men as well. Perhaps Chesnutt's most well-known story, though, is The Wife of His Youth, which has a surprise ending. For the first time in American fiction, Chesnutt, an insider, he presents us with a satirical look at this society, poking a bit of fun at their pretensions. However, The Wife of His Youth, like The Sheriff's Children, is a poignant look from a slightly different angle at the lingering effects of family separation during slavery. His realistic fiction was collected and published in book form as The Wife of His Youth and Other Stories of the Color Line in 1899. In 1900, he published his first novel, The House Behind the Cedars, which looks at the theme of living in the South as an interracial person and explores the concept of, quote, passing. The thought that a black American would want to pass as white seems strange to the 21st century reader. However, at the turn of the last century, there were not only social and economic advantages of doing so, but a very practical reason as well. It kept you safe from racial violence. Indeed, the decades between 1880 and 1940 are regarded by historians as the height of lynchings and of racial terror. Chesnutt's novel The Marrow of Tradition, published in 1901, is set during the Wilmington Race Riot, which was an insurrection carried out by white supremacists in Wilmington, North Carolina. This riot killed and displaced thousands of black residents of the city. By the time the Harlem Renaissance came, Chesnutt's writing took a back seat to up-and-coming writers such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Dorothy West, and many others. Although Chesnutt is a realist, his writing style is more 19th century than 20th. You'll notice some of his sentences are rather long and formal, more formal than later realists. Thus, Chesnutt was viewed as somewhat old-fashioned. But during the Black arts movement in the 1960s and 70s, literary scholars rediscovered Chesnutt, finding in his writing delicious moments of irony and biting social satire. Today, Chesnutt is now celebrated as breaking new ground thematically in his exploration of racial identity in fiction and in his interest in Black folklore. In some sense, then, Chesnutt can be considered the father of African American fiction.